In Locked On Red Wings, we profile winger Michael Brandsegg-Nygard with Tony Ferrari of the Hockey News.
You're Locked On Red Wings, your daily podcast on the Detroit Red Wings. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to the Locked On Red Wings podcast. We are your hosts, Brian Fisher and Scotty Bentley. I'm formerly a producer of 97 Wanted to Get, where Scotty's the host over at Locked On Tigers, as well as a freelance journalist for the Detroit News. And today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms and conditions apply. Scotty, we are very happy to be welcoming back Tony Ferrari of the Hockey News to help us profile someone that everybody is talking about right now in Red Wings land, being the big Norwegian winger who plays in Sweden, Michael Brandsegg-Nygard. Tony, you know it's draft profile season. We've done one profile, but we're not officially in draft profile season until you are on the show. I think for the Locked On Network, you're kind of the draft profile guru for a lot of us.
Yeah, I love coming on here for most of you guys, and it's always a good time to talk to you guys and reconnect. And this year, it's a little later for you guys. I'm used to talking to you in February, March, but the Red Wings were a competent team this year, and it was fun to watch. So that run at the end, especially with the way Lucas Raymond came out to play, it was a lot of fun.
Where do we rank in Locked On shows in your eyes? And if it's not one, don't say anything.
You're at least top three. You guys are top three.
I'll take it. I'll take that.
There's a couple that we'll not talk about that I'll leave at the bottom.
I'm pretty sure you asked him this a year or 2 years ago when we were doing a profile. I'm getting strong deja vu that you've asked him that question before. And I feel like at the time you said we were the best. Maybe we're sliding the ranks a little bit.
I asked Mikhail as well. And that was just straight up between us versus Locked On Sharks, who was better.
JD's garbage.
Oh, I'm clipping that and sending that right to him.
That's fine. I love JD. I probably said the same thing about you guys or someone else to him last time I talked to him earlier this week.
You ever watch Always Sunny?
Yes.
You know that scene where Max, I play both sides. That way I always come out the winner. That's what you're doing right now with every Locked On podcast you're on.
Always.
Smart man.
Anyways, Tony, we are bringing you on, obviously, to talk about Michael Brandsegg-Nygard, another pronunciation of that NY sound that I'm learning today. And we settled on talking about him last week when I reached out to you. And since then, he has blown up all over social media. I know just about nothing about this kid other than the fact that he plays in Europe. He's from Norway and he's big. What's the scoop on Michael Brandsegg-Nygard?
MBN's a fantastic player. I love this kid. He's been right in my top 10 all year long. I know a lot of people dropped him kind of towards the middle of the season when he had a bit of a scoring lull, but scoring in the Allsvenskan's hard when you're 17, 18 years old, and this kid was able to do it. And then the progression he had throughout the year was really interesting to me because he was taking the pro habits that he already had. He's a very pro-style player, a guy that plays with some physicality, plays off the boards, really looks like he's kind of, I don't want to say NHL ready, but he plays the NHL style of game already. And the offensive, the big concern is the offensive upside there. And he started to answer that towards the end of the season. After going about almost a half point per game throughout the season, he went completely off in the playoffs. He was 10 points in 12 games. Really the biggest reason that Mora made it as far as they did in the Allsvenskan playoffs. Fantastic player. He's scoring a ton of goals. We're seeing him play really well at the World Championships right now, and he was really good at the World Juniors. Really, honestly, one of the only 2 or 3 good players with that top line with Steen and Vesterheim for Norway. So he really is a high-end player that, because he is Norwegian, because he plays in the Allsvenskan and the scoring totals aren't bonkers, people we're sleeping on a bit. But you're seeing with this World Championship performance, people starting to come back around and people starting to see exactly what this kid is, because he can play on the boards. He can play. He's really good defensively as a winger. He gets to the net, scores a lot of goals that way, and he's got a really good one-time shot. So I think there's a lot of tools that you like. The upside's maybe not there of a guy in this range, maybe like a Cole Iserman, but you're getting so much more from a guy like Michael Brandsegg-Nygard with everything else he brings to the table.
Well, you kind of alluded to it a little bit there at the end of that comment, but offensively specifically, that's obviously been one of the questions throughout the season for him. I guess I want a more specific kind of like, I don't know if breakdown's the right word, but just like, how is he scoring, right? Like, what type of offensive profile, like if that's the biggest question, what does he look like in the offensive zone on a consistent basis, and why maybe are there questions about the I guess I'll say ceiling of his game on that end?
I think the big thing is we've come to love the flashy guy. Everyone wants the little skilled guy, and I still love the little skilled guy myself. I usually have them higher up the board, talking Berkeley Catton, guys like that, who play fast, play skilled, and deke and dangle, flash, and their highlight reel is so much fun to watch. Michael Brandsegg-Nygard's more of a meat and potatoes, going to go to the front of the net, going to go to the slot. He's a guy that when he's on the power play, he goes into the slot, in around the net, cleans up rebounds, but then he'll fade away and he has that big one-time shot that he is able to use. I think the biggest thing is I think people are still questioning where his playmaking upside is. I think that's a little bit of a question still, because he's a guy that's had to do a lot of it on his own, and he kind of took that role on as the season went on. So it's going to be interesting to see where that playmaking side comes from. But if he's a 25 goal, 35 assist guy, like that's a realistic upside for him. I think he plays on your second line, plays on your, if he's on your first line, he's probably the third guy on your first line, but he's also the guy that's going to go into the corners and fish that puck out, play defensively, and be that kind of defensive conscience there. And I don't want to use Zach Hyman because he's a guy that just scored 50 goals, but when Zach Hyman was in Toronto, he was kind of the guy that did the dirty work for Matthews and Marner and Nylander. He went and did all the stuff that never got appreciated, and they ended up with 40, 50 points. I think Michael Brandsegg-Nygard's that kind of guy. The upside's not there, and maybe for a team like Detroit where you've drafted a few guys like this already, you don't want him, but I think he's a guy that profiles a little bit better offensively than even a guy like Marco Kasper, but brings the same kind of style of game to the ice with maybe a little less speed.
So that brings me to the question, because you kind of mentioned it there, like the fit with Detroit. Red Wings fans, they saw there was a clip that made the rounds. I think it was Ice Hockey Gifts who tweeted it out, of just him going around being a bully in the playoffs over in Sweden, or World Juniors, one of the two, or I'm sorry, the World Championships rather, one of those two. And I gotta wonder, that's fun and all, but what's driving the hype behind him to the Red Wings? Because you talked about it there. The last few years, Yzerman's not afraid to go bold, a little bit off the board, go with guys who are maybe a little bit projected to have a little bit less skill, but more like you would say meat and potatoes. Why is Nygard kind of getting this push to the Red Wings at 15 by our fan base?
I think there's a few factors here. I think the Red Wings are always scouting Sweden heavily, and the fact that he's a Norwegian kid playing in the Allsvenskan, there's already that kind of like, oh, he's in that region that we love. Like, he's over there. I mean, Lucas Raymond, Axel Sandin-Pellikka, Simon Edvinsson, they've all come from Sweden. Through the years, Detroit's been known for drafting Swedes really high and drafting really well out of Sweden. So there's that element. But there's also the fact that Detroit has been drafting these kind of guys for a couple years now. I think Axel Sandin-Pellikka was the exception to that rule, and I think that was because they had the extra first-round pick. But they went for Nate Danielson when a guy like Zach Benson was on the board. They went for a Marco Kasper when there's other guys on the board that were maybe a little bit higher upside offensive octane players. And that's, I think, what's also driving the boat here. Detroit has done a very good job of adding third line guys over the last few years in free agency and the draft. And they've done a great job of building out a ton of depth. So I think people automatically assume they're going to continue doing that. I think this could be the draft that they change that. But with that said, at 15, a guy like Michael Brandsegg-Nygard brings some of that offensive upside, because I do think there's still more there. I mentioned 25 goals, 35 assists is kind of what I expect. There's room for him to improve on that. There's room for him to grow from that, especially if he is playing on a top line with a guy like Lucas Raymond and Dylan Larkin, or playing throughout the lineup. If he ends up being a guy that sits on the third line with Marco Kasper and insert other winger here, I think you could really have a guy that brings a little bit more to the game, depending on the role he's in. So I think that's really going to be a big factor for him. I think the big thing, though, as to why he keeps getting talked about with Red Wings is he's a pro-style guy, a guy that plays 200 feet. They've been drafting those guys, and he's been playing in Sweden. So I think everybody associates the Red Wings with Swedes, and that's just kind of where it goes.
Even though he's not technically Swedish, but he's just playing over there. Fair enough. We're going to head to a quick break. When we return, we're going to keep this conversation up. I have a question regarding if not Nygard, is a trade possible for the Detroit Red Wings? So we'll get to that and more in segment 2 of Locked On Red Wings. Got to talk to you guys today about Game Time. They are the authorized ticket marketplace of the NBA, which makes getting playoff tickets even faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to tip off, with killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee. Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets. You can, with last-minute tickets, you can save up to 60% off buying last minute for sports, concerts, comedy, theater. Scotty loves to wait to make sure the Tigers are actually going to score a couple runs before he buys his tickets, so that those last-minute ticket deals come in handy.
I may never go to a game ever again.
19 innings, baby. With flash deals, you can save even more with exclusive in-app deals on select seats ahead of the game or the event. And you can toggle the all-in pricing feature that show the total upfront with no surprise fees at checkout. And that lowest price guarantee means that they will credit you 110% of the difference if you find a ticket the same price in a different section for less. So take the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Segment 2, Locked On Red Wings podcast. We are joined by Tony Ferrari of the Hockey News. He's helping us profile Michael Brandsegg-Nygard. Nygard. Got to make sure I nail that pronunciation. Scotty, I believe you're next up, though. You got the next question. I'm throwing the hot potato your way.
Yeah, the hot potato. Yep. Yeah, I mean, I kind of just want to ask about his defense. Just, general, like, go a little bit more in depth. I mean, you kind of mentioned it before. It has been an important factor in Red Wings draft profiles in the Yzerman era, has been, defensive, that, they always say, can play both sides of the ice, well-rounded, et cetera, whatever analogy you want to throw on there. Just talk a little bit about his, I guess, fitting that mold in the defensive side of the puck for him.
Yeah, he's a strong player. I think he's a strong kid, and he's only going to get stronger from this point. At 18 years old, he's already willing to go into the boards and win board battles with strength. He understands positioning really well. I think that's a big asset for him. Whether it's out in space, he understands how to stay in the passing lanes and pressure the points and pressure on the half wall. Or if it's on the boards, he understands how to rotate his hips into the opposing player and separate them from the puck that way. He's willing to throw a hit here and there. Like, he's not going out here and chasing huge hits, but he's certainly laying multiple hits a game. And I think that's an asset in this game. So he's a guy that really understands how to play within the system, how to play kind of within himself. I think that's a big thing for players at his age. A lot of guys try to do too much. He doesn't. He knows what his job is in the defensive zone. He goes and does it, and he does it really well. So I think just understanding his ability to read the play, kind of get into the position right, and use the strength that he has. He's been playing against men for a couple of years now, and that's a big asset for him. He doesn't need to worry about going and bullying junior level players, and we've seen that at the World Juniors. He was able to do that. When his line was on the ice with him, Peter Vesterheim, and Steen, it was really them driving play against whoever they were playing. Even when they played up against the Americans, it was nice to see that line, for at least the first two periods, push back and really kind of put the United States on their heels, and the United States ended up winning the championship. So while they couldn't do it for a full game and the rest of the team really wasn't doing a whole lot, that line specifically really showed that they could do a lot. And Michael Brandsegg-Nygard drove a lot of that play, especially in the defensive zone. So I think just his understanding of how to read everything and at both ends of the ice really is a big asset for him.
We were talking earlier today, just chit-chatting back and forth while we were confirming the time slot we were going to do this interview. And, I made the comment that the Red Wings have the opportunity to do something bold this year. They've filled the cabinets. Not that Yzerman doesn't do something bold every year. It seems like always going a little bit off the board. But I mean, like, really bold. They're drafting 15th, which isn't incredibly high, isn't incredibly low. There's a lot of quality players to be picked there, a lot of quality players to be picked there. And at that point, it almost does kind of become who's who of wingers as well. And it makes me start to wonder if there's a possibility of moving out of 15th, either up, down, or trading it away altogether. I know you're not, follow the Red Wings as closely as we do, but just because you're a draft analyst, a prospect analyst, what do you think that value at 15 has on a trade market? And with the needs that the Red Wings have, do you think they're better off keeping it or trying to move it one way or the other?
I think the big thing is going to depend on if their guy is there. And I think that's kind of the story of this draft. I think the first 2 to 3 guys, I think everyone's kind of pretty unanimous on. Everyone knows Macklin's going first overall. Demidov, Levshinov, Stilayev are kind of in that next range. And then you start to go down the board and it's kind of a mess in reality. I think we're going to see a lot of teams go, oh, we got the 4th best guy on the board at 12th overall or 13th overall. And it's because, honestly, on their board, that might be the 4th best guy because from about 4 till about 20, I'd say, it really is just pretty interchangeable because this draft doesn't have a lot of high-end talent. And I think people are kind of confusing this draft for a bad draft because of that. But in reality, it's a draft that has a lot of roster fill guys. I think it has a lot of guys that fit into your middle 6 or your middle pairing. And they're going to be important guys on your route to win a Stanley Cup and to building a competitive team, but they may not be the guy. And I think that's the difference. If we go back to last year's draft, we have Connor Bedard, Adam Fantilli, Leo Carlson, Will Smith, Ryan Leonard, Matvei Michkov, up and down the board. We're looking at guys, even Zach Benson drafted, I think, 12th to 13th overall at Buffalo, played in the NHL this year. Really impact players, and it was deep last year as well. So you looked at last year's draft and you're like, man, nothing's going to compare to that. And you're right, nothing really is going to compare to that. So this isn't the 2021 draft. This isn't the 2017 draft. I think it's a draft that has a lot of guys that can be really productive players in the NHL. So if the Red Wings go, we want one of these 3 guys, they very well all could be there. They very well all could be gone. So if those 3 guys are gone or however many guys it is, then they go, all right, what can we get for this pick? Or maybe they do have 4 guys that are there that they really, really like. And they go, we could trade down to 19 or we could trade down to 20 and probably still get our guy. And if they do that, they pick up more assets, or they could go, hey, let's jump up and grab player X that we really love. Maybe a Berkeley Catton's falling and they're like, we love Berkeley Catton for whatever reason. He's the guy that we think is going to be the piece that's going to really put us over the top over the next couple of years. He's the second line center that becomes the missing piece. And Danielson and Casper can slot in a little bit more correctly and into their spots. And that's kind of where they go. It's going to be really interesting to see because the Detroit Red Wings really are in that situation now where they were right there at the end of the season. They pretty much almost made the playoffs. I mean, the weird goalie pull at the end that didn't need to happen and all the things that we've probably already litigated on this podcast a billion times all led to them just barely missing out on the playoffs this year. I think the team's going to be younger next year. They're going to have guys like Simon Edmondson, maybe a Nate Danielson or a Marco Casper play a bunch more games. Is a guy like Jonathan Berggren going to play more this season like he did the season before? Even if they are younger, I think they're going to be better though, because the players that they're going to unseat out of the lineup, whether it is a Robbie Fabry that Jonathan Berggren comes in for, how much are you losing there? Especially when Robbie Fabry's availability is always a question. Simon Edmondson comes in the lineup. He kind of solidifies whoever he's playing next to. He doesn't really make it worse. So I think you take guys like Justin Hall and different guys out of the lineup, and you're not worried about, are we sending our 3rd pair and 4th line out there just to hopefully break even? Now they're going to be able to do that and go, hey, Andrew Kopp's on the 4th line tonight, and we're going to have a productive shift or whoever else, right? Like you're going to be able to have productive shifts up and down the lineup because of some of these young guys are going to come in there and solidify things. So if they look at it and go, we need to bring in somebody that can help now, maybe they do trade that 15th overall pick. I mean, they traded their pick a couple years, or the Boston pick for DeBrincat. maybe they look at bringing in another trade like that. We saw Ottawa trade the 7th overall pick for DeBrincat. We've seen Montreal acquire and then flip the 13th overall pick for Kirby Dach. We could see something like that happen. I think Detroit's a real possibility to do that because they're a very good team that is almost there. Maybe it's a Capo Caco. Maybe they go, we can get this guy who was once drafted 2nd overall, trade the 15th overall pick, and get a guy like Capo Caco to come in here. He doesn't have the pressure, and then he starts to flourish because I think we're seeing it with Lafreniere this year. It took a little bit, but that New York Rangers development system maybe played a role in those two guys being a little bit of a bust. They get out of that system. Lafreniere is playing with Panarin, and he's finally getting the opportunity, and we're seeing what he can do. Maybe Capo Caco just needs a change of scenery, or someone else throughout the NHL. I'm just using him as an example. Sure. Maybe that's the kind of player they target with the 15th overall pick because they go, we could get player X who's going to be a third liner down the line, or we can get Capo Caco, who's already a developed third liner that has excellent defensive numbers already. So it's going to be interesting to see because I think Detroit certainly could make the trade. It's just going to be about, is their guy there at the draft pick that they want? Or is there a trade available to get a guy that can kind of come in and contribute right now?
Awesome. Tony, that was a beautiful answer. And I actually leads me to another question, but we'll have to put that off until segment 3. So stay tuned for that on Locked On Red Wings. Got to talk to you guys today about eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whatever you're into, speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. Segment 3, Locked On Red Wings podcast. We are joined by Tony Ferrari of the Hockey News as we profile Michael Brandsegg-Nygard, the winger playing in Sweden, but actually from Norway. I like qualifying that all. It's
would he not be the highest drafted Norwegian ever?
I think so. Yeah,
as long as he's a first rounder, I think. Yeah,
that's yeah. I think there was someone just outside the top 15, but if he goes in the top 15, which it looks like he probably will, he'll be right there.
Nice, that's cool.
You had mentioned a lot about the Red Wings and how close they were and how they are poised to make the leap next season. And that leads me back to the conversation we were having with Michael Brandsegg-Nygard. We talked a lot about how this player fits the mold that Yzerman is trying to build in this team. But then I ask, is going back to that same well the best decision for this team? What in your eyes is the biggest need for this Red Wings team right now? What are they lacking? And does Brandsegg-Nygard fit that mold? Fit that hole, rather. Sorry.
Yeah, it's interesting because I look at this Red Wings roster and I go, man, it would sure be nice if they had another, probably a second line center. I like Nate Danielson. I like Marco Kasper. I think they probably end up on the third line together, maybe. One of them moving over to the wing. But you need that second line center and honestly a little bit more skill. This is a very good, strong development defensive team, a team that knows how to kind of play at both ends of the ice. They've got a ton of veterans throughout the lineup now. Bring in some of that high-end skill. I think that's the interesting thing that I think that this team could use, whether it's an elite goal scorer or a guy that can set up other people and make them good high-end goal scorers. That's what I think they could use. Toronto will offer you Mitch Marner for pennies on the dollar if you want. Maybe that's the 15th overall pick. But in serious talks, but the skill is what I think they'd need. Would Michael Brandsegg-Nygard fill that? Not really, but I think he replaces some of the veterans that are sitting on the lineup right now that maybe are a little bit past their expiry date or getting there, and you could probably still get something for them. And he could kind of come in over the next couple of years when their contracts run out and be a piece that plays the style that you guys like and need, but he doesn't really fit that high-end skill or really differentiating factor. I look at a guy like Cole Eiersman. If he's there, he's that elite goal scorer that really is improved throughout the year. And I think that's something that not a lot of people are talking about. He's got some underrated playmaking ability, but that goal scoring is just, that could be something that could really impact the Red Wings. And if you have him and DeBrincat on two separate lines, then you really kind of bring multiple threats to score at any given moment. Berkeley Catton is a guy I've mentioned a couple of times because I think he brings a ton of play driving ability, a ton of speed and skill, and just the ability to make others around him better. So maybe that's the guy if he falls, because he has been getting a little bit of flack for being an undersized center, but it's not like he's 5'8" or 5'9". He's 5'11", almost. Maybe he'll get to 6 feet over the next couple of years, but regardless, we're seeing guys like that succeed at the NHL level. So it's going to be interesting to see who's there. But at the same time, I think Michael Brandsegg-Nygard's an incredibly underrated player in this draft class. And I think if he's there, which he very well might not be, he'd be a really good fit on the Red Wings long term.
I'm going to ask you the unfair question that I ask you every year and all of the draft profile people that we have on, and ask about timetable. I always preface it by being very open about how unfair of a question it is and how kind of difficult and ridiculous it is to try to map out how many years or seasons or whatever it's going to take for someone to get through a system. But I mean, for a guy who is, unfortunately, because the Wings missed the playoffs, a lottery pick, right? If he ends up going to the Wings there, like, what can we expect? I mean, by the way that you're talking about him and that so many other people have, it's, you know, he already has like the physicality and the size and a lot of the things that, you know, maybe hinder people from taking the huge leap. He already seems like he kind of possesses. So does that speed up like his long-term timetable, or is there, he needs to refine a lot of other stuff, so it's probably still pretty similar to the other people in that range?
I think it's probably pretty similar to the people in that range, because I think if you want to get the full scale of what his offensive capabilities could be, that's the thing you're waiting on. You're not waiting on his defensive game. You're not waiting on the fact that he's going to be able to play at both ends of the ice or be a physical presence or anything like that. So maybe next season he plays in the Allsvenskan or the SHL again, plays over in Sweden, comes over, plays the season in the Griffins, and then you go from there. And he could be in the lineup in 2 years after that. So it's certainly interesting. Kind of the same timeline that we look at a guy like Simon Edvinsson, Moritz Seider. 2 years after the draft, that's when they look to be possibilities on the NHL lineup. And is that going to help you get into the playoffs and win some games next year? No. But down the line, it could replace some of these guys that I think Eisman's brought in to help get this team over the hump. The JT Compers, the Andrew Kops. It's guys that are very good, and they bring a lot to the table, and they help teach some of these younger guys how to be pros, and they teach good habits, and they have good habits for the most part. There's some up and downs this season with a couple of those guys, but they kind of come in and do that for you. So having a young guy come in that can replace one of those guys in 2 years, replace some of the other guys in a couple of years, I think that's kind of what you're looking at with Michael Brandsegg-Nygard. But you kind of already have that in Marco Kasper. You kind of already have that in Nate Danielson. So it's going to be interesting to see where the Red Wings go. With that said, they could build a super third line with Brandsegg-Nygard, Danielson, and Kasper. But like I said, that second line is still an area where you got to fill it out. Maybe one or two of those guys end up being capable of filling that out, but they're kind of tweeners right now. They're middle six guys, and they really kind of fill out what the Red Wings have built, which is just a bunch of middle six guys.
Sure.
So I'm also going to ask you an unfair question, and I'm going to put you on the spot. And if you don't know the answer, well, I have the ability to cut things out. So have you seen our boy Nate Danielson in the WHL playoffs at all with the Portland Winterhawks? And for you uninitiated Red Wings fans, the Portland Winterhawks just lost the championship. Their season is over. So there is a possibility, it's not ruled out yet, that he could join Grand Rapids for their Calder Cup hunt. That's not confirmed nor denied yet. But he is eligible to do that. But Danielson had an explosive playoffs with the Portland Winterhawks. 24 points, 18 games, last year when the Red Wings took him at 9th overall, Scotty and I were kind of like, well, in Yzerman we trust, but we had our hearts set on Oliver Moore, like that speedy guy out of USNTDP. Like we wanted him, a Larkin type is how he was advertised. So when they took Danielson, we were like, okay, another well-rounded center, kind of like Casper the year before. What have you seen from Danielson that has impressed you the most in this not just the playoff run, but ever since he got traded to the Winterhawks from the Wheat Kings?
I think so. I've watched a bunch of them recently because when we talked about this last week, you asked about if I've seen them, and I was like, I've seen like bits and pieces of them, but haven't really focused in. So I watched the last 2 games of the final, and he was very good in them. He was among the better players for the Winterhawks. And then I went back and watched every goal and point he's had in the playoffs, and I watched a couple other games just to see how good he's been throughout the playoffs. And he's been very good. He's been very Nate Danielson. He plays north-south. He goes up the ice. He rips a shot off the wing. He does a lot of good things. My biggest concern with Nate Danielson is still okay, and then what? When that shot doesn't go in, are you figuring out how to continue the play? Are you figuring out how to really kind of continue to make an offensive impact? And while it's certainly improved from last year, it's just kind of improved to the point you expected, I think, at the WHL level. He's almost 2 points a game for the Winterhawks in the playoffs. Same thing in the regular season. Really good stats, very, very good stats on a very, very good team. And you could see how much better his game was when he had people around him that were functional hockey players, unlike he had with Brandon, unfortunately. And I think there's a lot of good progression, but I think some of the hype and some of the offensive pop that we've all seen was just, now he's a good player playing with good players, whereas before he was a good player really struggling to play with anybody on that team. They had some really young players that were really good, and when he played with them, he produced, but he wasn't always able to because they wanted to spread some of that talent throughout the lineup in Brandon because they didn't really have a lot of it. In Portland, he was constantly playing with good players. So I think with him not being asked to do as much and being able to kind of focus offensively and then lock down defensively when he was asked to, I think it suited him really well. And while he may not be this offensive dynamo, I still think he's got a shot at being a second line winger or a third line center and being a really good player on this team long term. Do you kind of look back in 5, 6, 7 years and go, man, I can't believe we passed up on Zach Benson or Oliver Moore, like you said? Maybe, but maybe you're also like, who cares? Because he's one of the best third line centers in the league, or he's a really solid option right next to our second line center, or he's playing next to Dylan Larkin because they just wanted that element on a line with him. And whatever it may be, I think he's going to be a really valuable piece for the Red Wings, but I think his value is going to kind of come from the defensive end, the rush attack, and being not asked to be the guy anymore. And that's what's going to be really nice in the NHL is he's probably not going to be asked to be the guy. And that's what he was being asked in Brandon. And you saw when he was in the playoffs, especially in the last few games in the finals, you watched him do what he always does, fly up the ice with the puck on his stick, make a pass to a teammate or get a shot on goal. And when he didn't know what to do, he had teammates that were able to find him in good spots to make sure he was able to kind of make the next play, do some really good things offensively. And he was able to slow things down. I think he was always trying to play at a million miles in Brandon because that was really the only way he could do anything to score. Slowing things down and learning to kind of regulate his speed. Something I know you and I have talked about before with Dylan Larkin early in his career. He had to regulate his speed. When he was going up the ice at a million miles an hour, he found himself in the corner a lot. I think that's kind of what Nate Danielson's going to have to figure out when he gets to the pro level is, okay, now I'm in the corner. How do I get out? Now, how do I prevent myself from getting in the corner in the first place? And just making those little adjustments and decisions. Is he going to be Dylan Larkin? Probably not, but he's probably still going to be a really solid player in the middle six for the Red Wings.
Awesome. What a pro, man. You mentioned Danielson once. He goes through and just starts watching tape. What an absolute pro.
Yeah.
I do my best, and it's towards the end of the draft class year, so breaking it up with some other players isn't too bad.
I just asked him, have you seen any of Danielson lately? He's like, I haven't, but I can watch tape if you want to talk about it. I'm like, you don't got to go that far. It's fine. He's like, no, it's fine. I'll do it.
Absolute
like,
pro. Absolute pro.
Yes. Tony, thank you so much for taking the time to join us. As always, we're going to be, as we approach the draft, still over a month away. You'll be back. You will be back. You don't have a choice in the matter.
It's fine. I'm happy to come back. It'll be fun.
We're not locked on Sharks, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, exactly. Gosh, JD, always bugging me. Oh, we got Macklin Celebrini. Oh, we're so good now. Get out of here. The Red Wings have done it without a lottery win.
Yeah.
That's what I'm talking about.
Scotty, one of our commenters says to form a heart with your hands.
What?
Like,
whoa.
There you go.
Dude, we like figured this out on accident like
It's
3
only-
weeks ago, and now people just keep commenting like other hand signals to do, and it's really actually scary.
It's only MacBooks. PCs can't do it.
No, I'm doing nothing.
I think there might be like a ton. I don't know. Anyways, we're all just doing hand signs. We're like Naruto characters trying to hand sign over here.
You're a nerd, Brian.
I am a nerd. It is confirmed. On the opposite side of the room is all the anime stuff.
Nice.
Tony, where can people find you and your stuff?
Find me on Twitter at the Tony Ferrari X, whatever it's called now. And you can find all my work at thehockeynews.com. Be doing a ton of draft stuff. If you want to see my latest rankings from just before the U18s, and they haven't changed a whole lot since then, you can check them out. They're pinned on my Twitter, so you can check all those out. There's a top 64 there, top 32 with a ton of scouting report and stuff on them. So check that out. Come to my DMs, yell at me, tell me I'm wrong, and do what we always do when draft time comes.
I want to make a joke about sneaking into your DMs, but I'm not going to do it because I'm really bad at being funny. Any final thoughts?
We ball.
Don't want to forget that. Same time, same place. It's your team every day.